Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is Liam O'Mara. You're on Office Hours with the Mad Professor. We're doing another entry in our conversation series where we try to talk to people running for office across this country and see what it is they stand for, see if we can kind of help out and have some good substantive conversations on the issues affecting the country. So today we're talking to Ram Mammadov, who's running in North Carolina, and I'd love to, pass it over to him and, get a little introduction. So welcome to the show, Ram, and how's it going?
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here. Glad to that we can catch up and talk about my platform, talk about my vision, what I want to do for our district, what I want to do for our state, and in fact, what I want to do for the country. And if you allow me, I'll introduce myself. I'll tell.
That sounds great. I'd love to hear. I always love to hear the elevator pitches first. Like, okay, so you're trapped with somebody. You got to pitch yourself in 60 seconds. How do you do it? So who are you and why are you in this?
Affordability and accessibility.
Oh,
That is the foundation of my platform. To have everything affordable, to have everything accessible. Liam, I'm an immigrant. I came here to America when I was only 20, by myself at the age of 20. I could barely speak English. Okay? Poor, broke immigrant. I settled in Michigan. I started working. My first job was working for, as you might have guessed, for minimum wage. I was working for the Detroit popcorn factory, making $6 an hour. Okay? I worked as a janitor. I worked as a dishwasher. I even slept on the streets of Detroit. It was December 6th, 2001. You can imagine it's snowing in Detroit, and I'm sleeping on the streets because I could not afford staying anywhere. So the affordable housing, healthcare, education, minimum wage, every single issue that you can find on my platform comes from the personal experience, comes from the personal pain, personal empathy. That's what I'm bringing into this campaign, my personal experience.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, Liam, just think about it for a second. We keep sending same old, same old, same old, whether it's local, on federal level, we keep sending the same old, same old. And what do we get? Same results over and over and over and over and over again. If we want to see true changes, true results, we want to see true reports and changes in what we're trying to achieve. We gotta have to send somebody with the personal experience. And that's what I always say. That why I mentioned that at the beginning: accessibility and affordability. When I came to this country, I never asked for anything. I never asked for free money, for food schemes, or any help at all. All I asked was equal opportunity. I want an equal opportunity, just like everybody else, to be who I can be. I want equal opportunity in education. I want equal opportunity in housing, in healthcare, in the jobs. Equal opportunity, nothing free. I don't want anything for free, but equal opportunity to become who I want to be. Right? Am I asking too much? Is it too much to ask for any person? Right? Is it too much to ask for equal opportunity? Absolutely not. Right? So this is the reason that I'm running for office. I'm running for the future, to build the future. And Abraham Lincoln said that the best way to predict the future is to build one. That's what I'm here for, to build the future and to preserve the same possibilities, the opportunities for everybody to achieve the American dream. You can be whoever you want to be. I want to make sure that you have that opportunity, you have the possibility. Not only for you and I, it's for I'm talking about the generations to come, long after you and I are gone.
Right. There's so much there that I mean, honestly, I love. I mean, talking about the American dream is always an important one for me. I mean, and coming at this as a historian, I really understand the Lincoln reference there, because studying the past isn't some kind of weird arcane discipline that's not supposed to matter. It's supposed to be, how do we get to a better place? It's to understand how we got to where we are, and to then think about how we can actually improve things. And a lot of people really miss the significance of that. If you want better outcomes, we have to figure out how we got here and what we can do differently. And I love that you're pointing to personal experience too, because we do send over and over again people from a privileged millionaire class that don't really understand what a lot of Americans are going through. I mean, the immigrant story is a great one, but it's one that a lot of people here could already relate to, because the American dream is getting harder and harder. And it's honestly the kind of things that draw people to this country. And I'd love to hear more about your experience coming as an immigrant too. But oftentimes the things that still resonate overseas and the things that still sort of matter to people about that American dream is the opportunity that you come here and you can be anything. But today we're down to 17th or 18th something in terms of social mobility. I mean, the American dream is being crushed, and it's now easier to get ahead and get out of poverty in quite a few other countries. And speaking as an American and as a descendant of immigrants who did come here with nothing and who did manage to try and work hard and build something out of that, it bothers me that so many people are willing passively to accept the situation that we're in.
Absolutely, right on spot, Liam. And what always excited me, the ideals of the United States, of the possibilities in this great country. And I think, I hope that I speak for every single immigrant who come here, that they're coming here for possibilities, for the opportunities to achieve, to grow, to be who they want to be. And this is by far, as somebody who's coming from the foreign culture, somebody who was born overseas, somebody who actually traveled, visited so many countries all over the world, I can say that this is the only country in the world, and I'm not lying to you when I say that, by working in McDonald's, you can, it's hard, but it is possible to afford, having a roommate, staying in an apartment. It's possible even afford a very old used vehicle. This is the only country in the world. Everywhere else, if you do that, it's hard to get by. Second thing is, this is the only country in the world where you can achieve anything because of your character,
Mm-hmm.
because of your hard work and dedication, without any connection. I always give my personal example, my story, that look at me, I was only 20 years old when I came here. I had no one behind me. My parents were overseas. Right? I had no connections. It's not that, I had a rich uncle who helped me out here. Absolutely not. By myself, achieved my American dream. Right? Why? Because, I kept my head down. I was working hard. I was studying. I had a goal. I had a dream, but I set the goals to achieve those dreams by setting the milestones for myself. But what is it that I want to do? And slowly working hard. Again, I'm emphasizing a lot on that word, working hard.
Right.
Because by working hard, you can achieve it, and that's the only country in the world. But unfortunately, Liam, to your point, as you mentioned, the younger generation today, they're not so sure about the future. They're losing their hope about the future. They're losing their hope for the opportunities, for economic opportunities, for political opportunities, for social opportunities. Even older generation, they are losing that hope as their needs go unmet. Right? So this is the reason that I'm in this race, because I want to preserve that opportunity. That for me and for any other immigrant, America has always been about the better future.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I knew that when I came here back then, I did not give up, even though you asked me about, to tell a little bit about my immigrant story. As I remember when I was working as a dishwasher, somebody else was working there. We had several people working as a busboy, the dishwasher, and somebody would approach me all saying, Ram, don't have high hopes don't keep your hopes high about achieving anything here. Nobody needs you. You're going to be washing dishes for the rest of your life. You're not going to be able to get even driver license. And back then, I couldn't afford the car. I didn't have a driver license. I was just walking from the place where I used to stay. I was just walking to the place where I was working. And he would just try to keep me down, saying that, nobody needs you for the rest of your life. You will be doing what you're doing right now. And what I've accomplished, is like, that's what I want to show to everybody, that
Right.
just because somebody cannot achieve something, don't let that bother you. Don't let them get in your head, and don't let them tell you that you cannot do it. They cannot do it because they have their own reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You can. Yes, you can. If you set your mind through, you can achieve absolutely everything. Don't give up. I didn't give up back then. I didn't give in back then. My favorite actor, Denzel Washington. I grew up watching his movies. I remember in one of the interviews, aside from being very talented actor, he's a very intelligent, very wise guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him saying that, the problem with people these days, that they're giving up too fast. Some people are, what's the word that I'm looking for? Acquiesce for defeat even before they start.
Right.
Right. So that is the problem that we're seeing. But we got to have to make sure we preserve these possibilities and opportunities for
Now that's something we need to dive into too, because I love that you talked about the question of like free stuff that comes up a lot in right-wing rhetoric, or the and really the way that kind of like comes across, because I love the emphasis on hard work. That makes sense. That's what I grew up with in my family. No one in my family had ever gone to college before. So I was the first to actually push through to that and managed to get all the way through to a PhD. But my family always they worked, and we worked hard, and they saved money, and they tried to make things a little bit better for the next generation. And that always has been a classic part of the American dream. It's something that we expect, that if you're willing to put in the effort. And so I love that you talk about the psychological dynamics about that, the not giving up hope, the not losing hope. But equality of opportunity is important. And that's the part that we're losing, that is shrinking a bit. It's making it difficult well, it's always hard, but because again, there's a difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. Not everyone is going to make it. You do have to put in the time. You do have to put in the effort to get there. But when you stack tons of obstacles in the way, it's tough for me to look back and recognize that if you adjust for inflation, the minimum wage in the mid-1960s is about twice what it is now. But the costs keep going up. So healthcare is more expensive, transport's more expensive, education's more expensive, and a lot of the housing's more expensive. You mentioned homelessness. A lot of people today are dealing with housing prices that are just completely out of touch with rises in income, which does make it harder to get ahead. And we want to encourage people to work hard and to have faith in themselves, but so many people struggle even to tread water, much less get ahead. So how can we help to, at least level the playing field a little bit, make it easier for people to put in that work and climb?
That's a very interesting question, and that's a very interesting approach. As I said at the beginning, affordability and accessibility. Right? And to your point, when you said that the outcome might be different for everybody, but at least given that opportunity, it's like preparing for the test. You and I can sit in the same room, given the same opportunity to prepare for the test. We're given the same textbook, right? But you might be reading through all night, and I might say that 2 hours is enough for me. I just read. I can't take it anymore. The next day when we go to the test, take the exam, you pass because you studied all night. I did not, because I studied only 2 hours. Right? I studied, but I did not study as well as you did. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it, we both were given opportunity, equal opportunity. Right? The outcome is basically up to us. So I want to make sure that opportunity is given to everyone, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in economic opportunities, job opportunities, education opportunities, right? You touch base on the minimum wage. You probably heard about the $15 minimum wage, mm-hmm. right? I personally disagree with it. If you ask me, mm-hmm. I disagree with it. $15, in my personal opinion, was yesterday. Today it should be $20 at least. Mm-hmm. At least $20. Let's do the simple math. Right. Now let's not talk. Let's do the simple math. $15 an hour. If you work full time, 40 hours a week, that's just $600 a week. Right? $600 a week. Monthly, that's what? $2,400 a month. Mm-hmm. Now, that's what you're making. $2,400 a month. if you are a single father of two, the
The yeah, the sound cut for just a second, but I think it's back.
Okay, you can hear me now. Okay.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, you're making. Let's take you as an example. You, a single father of two, you're making 2,400 a month, right? For you to make that money, you gotta have to work full time. For you to work full time, your little kids gotta have to be in the daycare and the child. Right. Now, child care alone. I'm a father of two. I remember going to bed. So, two boys being in the child care, the average child care yearly, it costs you around $12,000 at the minimum. Right now, it's even more. So, two boys, that's a $24,000 for the child care. On top of that, you add your housing, you add your car if you can afford one. Right? If not, you're in more trouble.
Right.
So imagine that $15 an hour, everybody's saying that's not even enough. So in my personal opinion, that's going to have to be enough for you to get by. However, that should not be your final goal. Minimum wage got to have to help you to stand up a little, get you on your feet, but then create the opportunity for you to be educated, to get the job, to get the profession that you want, vocational training, right? Trade jobs. The opportunities right now, I've been in the IT business for the last 15 years, even though my education I got a degree from, I went to Michigan State and I got a degree in political science and international relations. However, I got sucked in the private sector in IT. So many people do that, right? Everything that I've been doing, Liam, for the last 15 years, I owe it to 6 months of training, 6 months of technical workshop, and everything that I do today, I learned 15 years ago within 6 months. Okay, so this is the opportunity to provide for younger generation, especially technology is all around us. You know that, right? We're marching. We're already there. We're marching towards even more technological world where we're going to be surrounded by technology, right? So IT jobs, creating those opportunities, especially in the rural areas, right? So that leads to the infrastructure, making sure that broadband is available everywhere. I mean, to me, somebody who, and I'm sure you remember those 90s when we had this dial-up internet. Right? If you ask younger generation today, if you ask anybody, teenagers, hey, have you ever heard of dial-up? They never heard of dial-up, right? So that's the old time, the 90s, right? But to me, it is mind-boggling that recently I was talking to one of the constituents, and she said, "Hey, Robert, can you send me some pictures from the campaign?" And when I sent, she said, "Can you don't send me those at once? Send me just one by one, just one picture of the day." I'm like, "That's weird, interesting. Okay, I'll do that. Do you mind, ma'am, if I ask you why?" She said, "Because I have a dial-up internet and I cannot download those." I'm like, in the 21st century, we're living in the 21st century, 2022, dial-up internet, really? When we should have that broadband internet in everywhere, rural areas or not, especially during the COVID, when we were, like so many of us, were working from home, because the internet connectivity to the internet, that was the only opportunity for all of us to be connected and to do our work efficiently. So it is extremely important. But as I said, minimum wage is just to start with. But then we're going to have to create opportunities for families to develop into more. Get a job, get an education. So opportunities. And we'll talk about the healthcare also.
Yeah, it's one of the things that a lot of people don't really understand about, I guess, the purpose of both investments in infrastructure and in people, or in a lot of the kind of social welfare programs, or even in minimum wages, is the whole point of them is to help people get on their feet in the first place, to get them started. A lot of countries in Europe today that have more generous social welfare programs use them less, because people who need the benefits climb up out of poverty. And that used to be what we did in the US. And we did that very, very well for a long time. And it's still possible to get ahead here, but it's getting harder than it is, largely because of collapses in minimum wage, making it difficult to get other kinds of benefits, making it difficult to get ahead. You mentioned the internet one is a great one because it's so vital these days. You can't even apply for a job without access to the internet. And I mean, it's getting harder and harder to even get to a public library and use their computers. People need phones, and then they complain, oh, you're buying a phone. You can afford a phone, so you don't need help. I'm like, no, it's a necessary feature today. The question of internet, I actually had to move. I had to abandon my house during the pandemic because where I lived was actually in a city, but on the edges of the city, and they had never bothered to wire it to anything. My closest neighbor was a mile away, but I was still in a city of 60,000, and yet my house could not be wired for high-speed internet. So how am I supposed to continue my job? At that point, I'm a professor. It's interesting. I also had a background in IT that I self-taught, like way up high in the shelves up on the wall are just tons of old books that I taught myself to, and it's how I kind of like climbed up a bit, managed to save up the money and jump into college later to do what I wanted to do. But these days, I mean, I teach. And if you're going to be teaching during a pandemic, you have to teach remotely. To do that, I needed internet. I had to move and give up my home as a consequence. And if we had just wired this country, if we had just invested and connected everyone, we would see tremendous productivity gains. More people would be able to get ahead. It absolutely pays for itself.
Productivity gains, exactly, right to the point. I mean, why is it so hard to understand that? Look, Liam, if I am uneducated, if I don't have a job, it means I'm poor, right? If I'm poor, I'm sitting on the welfare, I'm asking government to help me. I'm not as productive for the society. But once you educate me, once you give me the opportunity to be educated, once I have a job with a pretty decent salary, guess what? I'm working, I'm paying taxes. I'm giving back to the society, that's my contribution to the economy of the United States. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, right? I'm working, so it should be in the government best interest to keep me healthy, to keep me educated, to keep me fed, because as I live, as I work, as I'm healthy, I am being productive, right? I'm not sitting on the shoulder of the government, but I'm actually giving back. So it should be in the best interest of the society to keep me as healthy as possible, as educated as possible, because I'm going to return back. So for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, you just calculate how much taxes I will pay, right? Versus being idle, sitting idle and being no good for our society. So absolutely, it's
Right.
mind-boggling, and I'm having a hard time understanding why is it so difficult. I mean, would you rather me sit and do nothing and ask for help and sit on your shoulders, or would you rather me actually being productive member of the society? When you see it's like investment, right? So you're investing into me, and for the rest of my life, you're seeing a return, right? So that's what I want. It's hard for me sometimes to understand the logic here. Like, what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve?
Yeah,
right?
it's really frustrating to me as a historian because we used really to understand this in the US, and it used to be harder for Europeans to understand it, and it's really flipped around in the last few decades where conservatives used to be perfectly happy with tons of infrastructure investments. Think about building the national highway systems. When we built the University of California system, I mean, it was originally tuition free. And it had tremendous benefits. And you can see the gains there in how fast the economy grew and how well off the baby boomer generation actually was. And then we started pulling up the ladder and making it harder for people to get ahead. I mean, just simple infrastructure stuff, not even talking about the impact of healthcare and education and everything else that helps the individual become more productive, but just infrastructure stuff alone. We have decades of studies. It pays back 3 to 1 in productivity gains. Every dollar that we refuse to spend upgrading our rail lines, our highways, our telecommunications grids, our power grid, which is extremely antiquated at this point and still dependent upon fossil fuels and everything else. Every dollar we refuse to spend there is $3 lost in actual economic growth. So it's mind-boggling to me that this is so difficult to get past. It's so difficult to convince people it's worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what we're trying to change here. You know what I'm saying? So to have more progressive minds to dominate within the Democratic Party, and this is the reason
Mm-hmm.
that I'm running on the progressive line. Like, for example, if we talk about the healthcare, right? We touched base briefly at the beginning. I'm coming from where I was born in European culture. Uh, it's basically, as you know, in most of the European countries, if not all of them, they're using the Medicare for the universal health care,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what does it mean? Right? And I could see that when I came here, I could compare what we have, the system that we have here, when you have insurance, you got to have to purchase insurance. For example, right now I have an insurance through my employer, right? So I have my portion that I pay as part of on a monthly basis from every paycheck, and then on top of it, you add co-pays, you add deductibles, then out of pocket, out of this, out of that, you know. So at the end of the day, if you calculate when you go to see a doctor, you're spending more time negotiating and understanding, you know, what is it out of pocket versus getting the quality of the health, right? That's why am I strong advocate for Medicare for all. And I'm speaking from the if I may bring some data points here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today, 30 million Americans, almost 1 out of 10, is without any insurance at all. 30 million. 45,000 Americans die every year as a direct result of not having health insurance. Right? What do we see? For decades, the private health insurance companies, big pharma, they've profited of the pain and suffering of Americans with all this increasing, as I said, co-pays, deductibles, premiums, right? Trust me when I say that we are the only industrialized nation in the world that does not have universal healthcare
Mm-hmm.
coverage. And we arbitrarily tie most healthcare coverage to the employment of it, right? And Medicare for All comes with so many benefits that people unfortunately unaware of. And why? Because of very strong propaganda that we have,
Right.
heavily financed and lobbied, guess by who? By the very same private insurance companies and pharmaceutical industry, right?
Right.
So benefits that include, I don't know, long-term care, disability coverage, mental health, right? It will dramatically bring down the cost of prescription drugs, coverage of vision, dental, hearing.
Right.
One plan, one form, right? No advertising budget, no profit for shareholders, no deductibles, no copay, no nothing, right? We are it's unbelievable that we currently pay trillions and trillions to the insurance companies, and we're the only nation in the world where a household can file the bankruptcy due to the medical bills. I did not know that. I always thought that number one reason for bankruptcy is you're losing your job, you're losing your source of income, that you cannot pay your bills. I did not know that the main number one reason in America for bankruptcy is due to the medical bills.
Right.
While having the insurance, that's the tricky part. You have an insurance, and you end up with the medical bills. You file for bankruptcy. It's unbelievable. So that's why I'm a very strong advocate for Medicare for all. Right. And the biggest question here to ask, as you might have heard, probably is so many candidates or so many people come saying that healthcare is a human right. It's not a privilege. Okay, what is your plan? Aside from all those buzzwords and the how do I say that political slogans, like buzzwords and patriotic slogans, like do you have a plan delivering the healthcare?
Right.
All we hear the buzzwords, but what is your plan for reforms that is not centered around profits and focused actually on people, right? Especially on minorities, especially people of color, low income and poverty stricken communities that are disproportionately affected by not having healthcare coverage. I'm asking any candidate, left or right, do you have a plan that makes sense? If you do, let me hear it. But you don't. You do not have it. Both Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, uh, elected officials, they campaign, they won the election based on their promises to fix the health care. Has it been done?
No, no, we've
It's
been
not.
hearing people campaigning on this since the 1960s, and we still can't
There
get
you
it
go.
done. And it's a bunch of talking points, buzzwords. It's tons of empty promises. If someone just says healthcare is a human right, or I support universal healthcare, cool. Tell me how you're going to get there. And
Yeah.
so many of these corporate-centered programs are ultimately the problem. I mean, they knew back when this was being discussed in the 60s and early 70s that allowing profit in healthcare in the first place was going to send costs through the roof. And it was discussed, and they pointed this out, and they said, okay, well, let's do it anyway. And costs for our care have shot up. We now pay more than twice as much as any other rich country for healthcare, and our results are worse. Our lifespans are falling. Our health outcomes are worse because people can't afford the preventive care. So more people develop things like high blood pressure or diabetes or whatever because they're not going in to see care regularly because the copays are too high or they just don't have access to it. Medical bankruptcies, honestly, it infuriates me that this is a thing, not to mention that it is, yes, the leading contributor to it, but that it happens at all, that you lose everything because you got sick. Medicare for All, I think, is brilliant in terms of the efficiency. And people really should understand that the Medicare for All bills that are being pushed today are not like the current system that's been steadily weakened. It actually does lower the cost for prescription drugs. It includes, mental health care and dental and vision and tons of things that are constantly pushed aside in Medicare. But the efficiency of it, I mean, when you have to make money off of something, the simple administrative parts in Medicare are about a tenth as expensive as it costs to do it in private terms.
20% of with medical premiums and everything, the 20% of money is spent on the paperwork rather than delivering healthcare. Right now,
Right.
with the issues that we have, 20% of everything is spent on that bureaucratic part of it.
Right. When it's 2 or 3% from Medicare. I mean, how do you compete with that? And on top of that, even with the loss in efficiency because of all the paperwork there, then there still are shareholders that need to make a profit off of it. And you saw people like constantly freaking out about this. Well, do you want the government to decide whether grandma lives or dies? Well, no, not really. So I want them to just guarantee coverage, but someone already is deciding if grandma lives or dies, and that person wants to make a profit off of it. So why are we not actually criticizing the existing system too?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they say that you can with your current insurance, there's in network. I could never understand what it means in network, out of network. If I live in North Carolina and I travel to New York or California and I get sick in California, what does it mean I'm out of network? If I'm sick, I'm sick. Doesn't matter where I am.
Right.
So what does it even mean in network, out of network? I'm sick. I need help.
Mm-hmm.
I need to see a doctor. I need to go to hospital. Who cares where I am, right? So that's what mind-boggling. There's so many, and right now, you're like if you go to the doctor, like recently I noticed that you go to the doctor, you have a limited time, and you have a set of questions that you can only ask. If you ask anything outside of it, they're going to be charging you. And I'm like, are you serious? So basically, you're limiting me. What is the point of me? I would rather just. It's easier for me to just roll over and die because what's the point of going and seeing a doctor? You know what I'm saying? Where I cannot freely, openly ask questions about my health.
Right.
Right. So it's like,
speaking of rolling over and dying, I mean, okay, so we are now. Okay, so according to the CDC statistics, we're just a hair under 1 million dead in the pandemic. A lot of independent analyses. I mean, The Economist just released theirs last week, and they're thinking it's somewhere between 1.1 and 1.2 million Americans have died directly as a result of the pandemic. But we are, again, the only industrialized country, as you said, without universal health care, and our death rate is literally twice as high, which means we have sacrificed 500,000 American lives for nothing. for
Yeah,
for the
absolutely.
profit motive for an insurance sector, not for the healthcare providers. Because again, healthcare providers, they deserve to get paid for what they're doing, but it's money going just to bean counters, just to those middlemen.
And unfortunately, what also contributed to that, the propaganda, politicizing everything. And
Mm-hmm.
last 20 years that I've lived here, I've seen disagreements between Republicans and Democrats on so many things, right? 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But what's interesting is they always maintain that civility in the disagreement. But in the last several years,
Mm-hmm.
what I've seen, everything, any topic that you talk, everything is political. Everything gotta have to be left or right, left or right. Same thing with the pandemic. It has become so politicized that uh, conservatives would say that, oh yeah, anti-mask, anti-vax, oh say no to this, say no to that. I'm like, it is not about your right for mask. It's my right. It is about my right to leave. Right.
Right.
So why not trying to save lives? And especially for those who call themselves so-called pro-lives, right?
Right.
It's
Mm.
interesting about Liam.
Mm.
I'll tell you a story. Recently, when I was campaigning, I visited a church. I went to the church. I was invited as a guest speaker. And at the end, somebody approached me and asked me, saying, "Are you pro-life?" I'm like, "That's an interesting question. Could you define pro-life? What does it mean pro-life?" Because the way I see that, conservatives, instead of focusing on the suicide prevention, instead of focusing on ending a death penalty or fighting
Mm-hmm.
poverty or curbing hunger or stopping the gun epidemic, violence and
Mm-hmm.
police killings, or combating the opioid epidemic or
Mm-hmm.
ending wars, right? Uh, for something, standing up for those things that actually save lives.
Right.
So if you look at me, if you look at my platform, that I stand for minimum wage, increasing the minimum wage, providing health care, providing the housing opportunities, providing the education opportunities. The way I answered, I said, you know what? I'm actually more pro-life than all conservatives combined together,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm truly standing up for life, to
Yes.
sustain that life, right? What you're talking about, what conservatives talk about, it's pro-birth and telling women what to do. It's like, I'm like, imagine me, a complete stranger, approaching you, a grown-up woman who is capable of making her own decision, whether it's a right decision or wrong decision. I'm not here to judge, and nobody can judge. It is your grown up adult decision, and we gotta
Right.
have to respect the decision. We have to protect that decision, right? So it is your healthcare decision. People make Look, Liv, people make healthcare decisions, very important decisions every day. People who go through chemotherapy, right? Chemotherapy, they decide that, hey, you know what, it's too much. I would rather die. I don't want to go through chemotherapy. People who are losing their limbs, amputated legs, right? You're not going to be forcing somebody, strapping them to the operational table and cut off their leg, right? So if a person says that, hey, I would rather die in the next 2-3 months, but in one piece instead of without, like, it is his or her personal healthcare decision. You cannot force them. You can
Mm-hmm.
suggest, you can recommend, but making decision for them, we should not be doing that. So when people ask me about that pro-life stuff, I'm like, let's separate that. You're talking about making a decision for somebody where you should be doing that, making that decision. I'm here to protect your right, that you
Right.
have the right. But when it comes to the pro-life, I'm actually, as I said, with everything that I have on my platform, I'm more pro-life than any Republican. You want to talk about pro-life? See what they're doing, for example, in the countries like Dubai or in these Middle East, some of the Middle Eastern countries. For every born child, a government deposits $100,000 in the bank account. In Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, they do that. $100,000 as a college fund. Now, that's pro-life, if you ask me. Where they deposit money, saying that when that kid grows up and goes to college, that kid got gazillions there on his account, and he can afford any college, any institution in the world, right? That's pro-life to me. Sustaining and promoting that life, right? Versus here telling women what to do, basically dictating them what to do. And another thing I said, uh, one question that I was asked, same thing about the pro-life. I said, look, conservatives will do everything in their power for that child to be born, but they will do absolutely nothing to help that child
For
to
that
grow,
child,
to
exactly.
provide financial assistance for his parents to raise that child, provide the housing, provide the education, providing food. You know what I'm saying? So providing health care. So that's if you dig about pro-life, that's the true meaning of pro-life, sustaining and providing that life to make sure that a human being grows up living that life, be very productive. Right. So that's, in my personal opinion, that's pro-life.
No, it really is. And it's something that has consistently, frankly, infuriated me about a lot of democratic politics, is that they immediately acquiesce to right-wing framing and the right-wing narratives. When somebody says pro-life and then you contrast that with pro-choice, you've already lost the argument, because then your choice is anti-life. I mean, it basically hands them the moral high ground when they clearly do not have one. The reason that people do seek, I mean, there's so many reasons people can seek abortion as a decision. You know, I mean, oftentimes it's like purely medical issues. I mean, it has to happen or you're risking the person's life. But frequently, and this is throughout all of human history, people have made those decisions for simple economic reasons. If another child is born, then it imperils the ones that currently live because there's not enough food. So if you have a family that is already on the edge of starvation and you have another child to feed, you mentioned the cost of childcare earlier. How am I going to work if I can't afford the childcare? So you're basically forcing people into generational poverty. And if you have a new child that's now raised with insufficient health care, with insufficient food, housing insecure, poorly educated, you know, they are going to struggle. And then you wonder why we have the highest crime rates in the developed world, because you're forcing people into terrible life circumstances. So yeah, pro-life, essentially, yeah, it's pro-birth, but it's also anti-life. And I love that you frame so much of your platform in pro-life terms, you know, in realistically pro-life terms. Because yes, I mean, how do the people who say they're pro-life also support executions, and executions of like literal children and mentally ill people, or support tons of wars? Yeah, it's totally okay for us to kill 100,000 people somewhere else. That's not really pro-life. I mean, or to deny tons of basic benefits to people so you leave them in grinding poverty. To me, it's one of the most unpatriotic things anyone can do. And to see someone stand up and say, "Hi, I'm a patriot, and I want Americans to starve." I'm like, what planet are you from? This doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. There's no logic. And to your point, when the pro-choice, right? When people ask me, "Hey, Ron, are you pro-life or are you pro-choice?" I always say that I'm pro-healthcare decision. That's it. Pro-healthcare. This is as a grown-up woman, your
Right.
decision. Whether it's a right decision or wrong decision, it's between you, your loved one, and your physician, your OBGYN. That's the decision that needs to be made. I'm not here to make that decision. I'm here to make sure that you have that right. That's what I'm going to stand up for, to protect your right to make that decision. Right or wrong, it's not me to make the
Right.
decision. It's your decision. That's it.
Which I think it's amazing that we acquiesce so much to the right-wing narratives on this, when again, you can use their own arguments and turn this back around. If they're constantly talking about freedom and personal responsibility and choices, and they don't want the nanny state to tell them what to do, like using their terms, right? You're basically criticizing government moralizing. You're criticizing the government stepping in and making a moral decision for you. So why are you willing to step in and make a moral decision for somebody else? You know, plenty of people make that decision and have a morality that says, I cannot do this, and others do not. And to impose a single standard is essentially to impose, it's literally flipping what the founders were aiming for on its head. The basic freedoms of individuals in this country to make their own decisions and to disagree. We argued that we could not establish a state church or state religion because that would be imposing a view on people. So how do you do that when people disagree so much on these issues? Leave the choice to them.
Absolutely.
And
There's the choice. I mean, people are capable of making choice, right? And again, going back to that being pro-life, you mentioned about, and I said that also in my statement about ending. For example, why am I for ending the death
Mhm.
penalty? Right? I personally believe that any society that is no better than those that it condemns to die, that society has lost its moral compass.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not a Christian, but I follow so many teachings of Christianity. I follow so many things that Jesus was teaching. In the one of the ten Commandments says that do the Ten Commandments. I'm sorry. Thou shalt not kill. Period. Thou shalt not kill. In the sense that when you are taking someone else's life, right? Like it. One thing is when your health is in jeopardy, and you're going through some certain personal healthcare moments. But another thing is uh, you are condemning somebody to die. And unfortunately, history knows so many examples of innocent people being executed, right? When the system finds out later on that, oh my God, there was some evidence that were uncovered that could have actually not only saved that man's life, but actually set him free.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that person was condemned to die, right? I always believe that in the divine justice, right? If that person is innocent, give him a chance to prove his innocence. He might be in a prison for a certain period of time, but at least he's got a chance to prove his innocence. And if he's guilty, I mean, he's going to be in a prison for the rest of his life, right? The prison life is not a walk in the park, right? So he's going to get what he deserves in the prison itself. So I always believed in that divine justice. That give everyone a chance. And obviously, so many people out there might say that, hey, Ram, you don't know what you're talking about. Your pregnant wife was never stabbed 99 times, or your 9-year-old daughter was never, killed or mutilated or burned or this. Yes, I understand that. I never experienced and I never endured the same tragedy that so many people did, and I'm sorry for that. And I hope that nobody goes through that kind of roller coaster, emotional roller coaster. But I'm coming from the human part of it, right? Let's put our emotions aside and let's think rationally. What if? There's all this what if. What if that person that we think has committed something, has done something, it just turns out that he or she was in the wrong place in the wrong time. What if? There's always that what if that makes you on the edge a little bit, thinking that, what if something goes wrong? What if I'm making a mistake? Right? So if you give another person a chance to prove themselves, right? So reasonable doubt. If you have that reasonable doubt, there's always gotta have to do with that.
Right. And so from my perspective, just in moral terms, and I like that you put it in moral terms, and I like that you actually mentioned divine justice too, which sort of resonates with me, because humans are fallible. We do make mistakes. And as far as I'm concerned, if you have executed a single innocent person, then the system is a problem and needs to go. And we have executed a lot of innocent people. Not to mention that the purpose of prisons is not only to, keep someone out of the population that can cause harm, but is intended to sort of rehabilitate someone so that they can become a productive member of society again. And we end up constructing a prison system that intentionally brutalizes people and gives us the highest recidivism rate. People end up committing more crimes when they get out because they were further brutalized in the prison system itself. And to me, it's so counterproductive. It wastes vast amounts of money. We're throwing huge amounts of money at it just to execute a few people. And it takes us back to, well, essentially a sense of retribution. You just want revenge for something, but that revenge isn't justice.
It's not just, I'm telling you. Yes,
right.
you're operating out of your emotion, and I get it. You are angry as a parent,
Hmm.
as a relative, you're angry. But what if? That's what I'm always like thinking. What if you make a mistake?
Right.
What if your anger, what if your emotion clouding right now your reason, and you're not seeing like take an example of yourself, right? When you are uh, somebody crosses you, when you're driving, somebody crosses you, like cuts you off. You're so angry, saying, "Oh my God, look at him! I'm ready." But if you cool down for a second and think about what if the very same person that cut you off on the green light, what if that person has a pregnant wife in the car right now?
Hmm.
What if that person got a call from his wife at home that the kid was kidnapped? What if? That
Hmm.
what if, right? Let's put ourselves in the shoes of others. Like, let's not to be driven by those emotions for
Right.
the moment, right? We're human beings. It's too easy. Like, it's easier said than done, right? I understand that. Me also, I get through the emotions, right? But if we cool down and just think outside the box, and leave that room for what if you think about it, you might come up with 1001 reason not to do what you're about to do, right? Not to say what you're about to say, because you're thinking rational, you're imagining different scenarios that other person is going through.
Right.
Right? So that what if? So
And
that's
that
very
what
interesting subject.
that what if is so powerful. I mean, taking a moment to express a little empathy, to try and imagine what else could be happening there. And yes, somebody could be doing something wrong. Some people might be being a dick or something, but does that mean that everyone is? And does everyone immediately merit a kind of punishment? No, we created a justice system intentionally to weigh evidence and to see whether or not someone actually did something. And we always have to have that sense of reasonable doubt. And even if somebody goes through the system and the system does still declare them guilty, we have constantly found issues in that. Mistakes that go through. We have a massive backlog in terms of the public defender's offices in different places because we're not funding that. So many people are forced into plea bargains where they admit guilt just to get a lighter sentence because they have no actual access to legal counsel that can represent them through the whole thing. So people are railroaded through a system, forced into accepting a kind of guilt that isn't even the case way, way too often. And some of these things do affect capital crimes, where people are stuck in situations where the prosecutors intentionally have left certain things out, the defenders have not known enough of the evidence, and you find out later, oh yeah, this guy just spent 20 years in jail and didn't actually do it. If you're then taking that further step and you executed him, how is that just? Where's the justice in that? If we're really going to be pro-life, then we should want a government that is not intentionally killing our own citizens.
And as I said at the beginning, that any society that is no better than those that were condemned
Mm-hmm.
to death, that society has lost its moral compass.
Right. Yeah. It's a sense where if you're going to argue in the first place that murder is wrong, okay, good. Murder is wrong, right? Then it should be wrong when the state does it too. And we rationalize that in a way that sort of pushes away our responsibility. I didn't do it. I didn't kill that person. The government did. Well, then I guess killing isn't wrong. So why was he punished? It's like an interesting contradiction people can't get around except by recourse to the emotions or to retribution or something. And I love that you're framing that in like pro-life terms. That really resonates with me as an ideal because so many of the progressive policies that people talk about, increasing access to education, ending homelessness, improving healthcare, they're inherently pro-life. And restricting all of those things is not. It's literally expecting Americans to fail.
Absolutely. But I mean, people are going to have to understand the pro-life. It's Let's look at the broader aspect of it. What pro-life means? It's sustaining the life, making sure that that life goes on for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all, it's written in upstairs, as they always say, how much time we have on earth, right? So, but for as long as I live, that's what I said also at the beginning, that government should have an interest in keeping me alive for as long as they can, because more I'm alive, more I am a productive member of the society. I'm contributing to the society, right? I'm paying my taxes. I'm making this country richer by being alive, by being healthy,
Mm-hmm.
by being educated. Right? I have a job, I have a house, I have a car, I have credit card payments. Right? So if you look around, uh, I get benefits, but I also, as a human, as a productive member, so I give so many benefits back to the government. So it's a give and take, right?
Right.
So I knew at the beginning that when I would come here to this country that Uncle Sam will not fall in love with me, right? So I knew that. So and that's true, right? So the country is not in love with me. The country needs me as a productive member to be to be alive and to
Right.
contribute to the society.
And just
So
to push back on the constant Republican narratives about like a nanny state and, oh, you want them to take care of you all through your life or whatever. Like, no, again, it's about equality of opportunity. So someone has been born. Now they need certain things. If they get an education, it helps them, but it also helps all of us. And it doesn't mean that everyone is going to get the best out of their education. It doesn't mean that someone isn't, I don't know, heavens forbid, going to get, leukemia and die at 20 or something. We can't prevent everything. But when you're intentionally throwing up obstacles or you're intentionally getting in the way of proper care, because yes, someone does get sick and they could die in their 20s from a preventable illness. So how is it in our benefit as a society to give up the next 60 years of someone's life and realize this person could have been, I don't know, the next Einstein or whatever, but you let them die for no reason at all? I mean,
yep,
they're basic investments in humanity that also invest in the country as a whole and in the success of this country.
absolutely. I mean, uh, look what happened to your statement previously. We roughly lost around, well, uh, without exact numbers, roughly around 1 million people we lost during the pandemic. So if you look at it, and that's a human part, right? But if you look at it from the economic perspective,
Mm-hmm.
we lost taxpayers. So
Right.
how are you gonna fill that gap? Right? What are you gonna do? Are you gonna just say, man, that's okay, 1 million people, so what? Big deal, right?
Right.
Or you're going to do something that there's a gap that needs to be filled. So
Right.
what are you going to do with that, right? So how gonna reinstate? How are you gonna reinstate the workforce, because people die, the living, breathing people die. What are you gonna do? So we're all mourning, we all sorry for that loss, but let's now think about how we're gonna move on, how we're gonna get by, right? What we're gonna do tomorrow, the day after. What is our plan?
Right. And
Uh,
so few people actually have any kind of plan to think about that. And it seems like a skill that we're losing, at least in our political class, to think about the future, to plan for the future. We used to be thinking so much more about that in the US. And I think that it's something that we, as voters, should demand of politicians, somebody who is willing to think for the future, someone forward thinking that wants to talk about how we make things better for ordinary people. I have a couple of other like significant policy areas I want to ask about based on some positions of yours, and then there's like one cool little question so that we can tack on near the end here. So um,
sure.
there's one issue that I think we can tie into some of the current geopolitics based on something that you've said, and another one on the basic economic situation of ordinary people. And I think that's the easiest one to start with here,
Sure.
especially since we've talked a lot about success for ordinary people, the pursuit of the American dream. So how do we tackle poverty? I've seen in your platform that you've raised the question of a guaranteed minimum income. And this is
Okay.
something that was discussed widely in the 1960s in this country. Everyone from Martin Luther King to Richard Nixon brought it up. And we have essentially abandoned the idea. And instead of the kind of like Johnson era Great Society programs, we rolled all that back in the 1980s and poverty has been climbing. How can a guaranteed minimum income actually help to reverse that trend and bring more Americans out of poverty and make us more productive?
That's a great question. So let's start with the minimum wage, right? So when I said about minimum wage, and then I drew analogy and I gave you the specific statistics of let's do the calculation if you are working on the minimum wage job only. As you could see that minimum wage can help you a little bit get on your feet, but it doesn't mean that you've got to have to rely and continue working for the rest of your life on that. So the guaranteed minimum income, what does it do? Right? It provides a system, it's a welfare system that will guarantee you, guarantee every citizen, a sufficient income for you to live on. Right? So to have the universal minimum income, right? Guaranteed income. That helps for you to getting out of the poverty, providing that eligibility for you, if I may use that word, to get out of poverty, to meet certain criteria that you are now out of poverty. Right? So that helps a lot, and this is something that should be focused right now, especially now with everything that we see that's going on. With we just I don't know whether I can say that we're not fully out of the pandemic. We're not fully out of COVID. So, but at least what we suffered were the economically, socially, with the rising, the inflation is on the high rise, right? So it is especially now the guaranteed minimum, universal guaranteed minimum income should be a hot topic for any political establishment, for the government to make sure that people do have that minimum guaranteed income for them to get back again, to provide any means for them to become a part of the normal society, and that will help especially minorities, especially the challenged areas of our country to come out of that poverty and start living the life that they need,
Right.
because it's very interesting. It's not a 1 hour conversation. I'm saying that it's everybody got to have to jump onto that and start discussing it. And what is it that we can do as a government? What is it that we can do especially for the hardworking families right now that are suffering, basically. They're suffocating. So that guaranteed minimum income will help them tremendously get out of poverty.
Yeah, there are so many people in this country that can't even turn to the existing programs because it's become such, a Byzantine labyrinth of it's like a bureaucratic, it's like dealing with a lot of the welfare and social security type systems in this country. It's like navigating a Soviet bureaucracy. People have no idea what the hell's going on, and you get different information from different people. You practically have to hire an attorney just to figure out what you qualify for. So many people cannot get the help that they need to feed their own children. If we clear out some of that bureaucracy and simply provide a starting point for people and don't make it dependent upon things. I mean, so many people struggle to meet the different qualifications or whatever, or realize, if I take a better job, I'm going to lose the childcare benefit that I get or the healthcare benefit that I get right now, which means it's going to cost me more. So taking this better job means I'm lowering my living standards. And that should simply never be a question that Americans need to ask.
Absolutely. I mean, what is the goal? To your point, you're minimizing your abilities. We gotta have to minimize the dependency, not the ability, right? And what is the primary goal of the guaranteed minimum income? Is reduction of poverty, right? For working families, get out of the poverty. I mean, why not? Why not? I mean, again, look at it from the economic perspective. Do you, as a government, gain more from me being in poverty, or would you gain more if I'm out of poverty? You know what I'm saying? So because if I got a better job, better salary, I pay more taxes. I'm paying taxes because I'm making more, and obviously I'm paying more taxes. So that's the concept that everybody's got to have to see, especially on the government side. That what is the benefit? What's in it for me as a government? Well, that's what's in it for you. In your best interest for me to get out of poverty.
Right.
because I'll be returning more to you, to the government. I will pay more as my and your tax revenue will generate, right? It will generate. It will skyrocket like in every state. So
Yeah.
that's what the guaranteed minimum income brings with that. The biggest benefit is for people getting out of poverty and becoming a productive, very productive members of society.
And I think there's a real opportunity in the way that a lot of conservatives attack these issues. So they'll take a moral stance on it, talking about dependency or whatever, and you don't want to be dependent on the government. And okay, cool. So if you take that seriously, then you should want programs that genuinely pull people out of poverty, not leave them dependent. The current system, as stingy as it is, as complicated as it is to get through, keeps more people in poverty, which then reduces growth and hurts everybody. But if we actually reform that system to help people climb out of poverty, then you're achieving the moral objective that conservatives claim to hold. So from my perspective, coming at this as Democrats or progressive Democrats talking about this, why don't we take seriously the moral claim of the conservatives that, okay, cool, you don't want people to be dependent on government? Neither do I. Let's clear some of this stuff out and let's just simply end poverty. That we were having those conversations in the 60s and we still haven't been able to tackle this today. It's so frustrating.
I'm with you. It's with the conservatives, they're contradicting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What they want is one thing. Again, their catchy phrases and political slogans is one thing, and the actions,
exactly the opposite. Yes,
it's exactly the opposite. So I'm like, okay, so why don't you do actually what you? I agree. What you want to do, fine, let's do it. Why not helping people getting out of poverty?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you don't want them, because if I'm in poverty, I'm basically dependent on the government, and I'm sitting on the government's shoulders. So you don't want me to do that. At the same time, you want to keep me as poor as you can. You keep them. Sometimes I think that the goal and the only policy that conservatives had, keep them sick, keep them poor, keep them uneducated.
Mm.
And it's all for political gain. That when people are uneducated, when people are poor, when people are sick, the last thing on their mind is the voting, right? So as I always say that when I talk to the minority groups, I always say that as minority as we are, right? And I consider myself also as minority because I'm an immigrant. So I'm also saying that I'm a minority. As minority as we are, we hold the majority power of vote. I mean, look what they're doing with the Voting Rights Act, right? So why blocking that actually blocking the minorities from getting to the polls? Mm-hmm. Why? People say that, my vote doesn't count. It has no power. Whatever I do, there's no. I'm like, really? Why don't you think of it from the different aspect? If your vote was not as powerful, if your vote did not count, why do you think that they're blocking so hard minority votes? Because as a minorities, we hold the majority of the power. We can make the changes, right? But why are you not getting out and voting? Because you're saying, hey, I don't have time. I have to feed my family. I'm uneducated. I don't even know how to register, where to register. So I'm better off at home because I don't know anything, right? So that's the whole perspective that keep them, as I always say that for conservatives, they say that keep them sick, keep them poor, keep them hungry, keep them uneducated. They're better off that way.
Right.
And it gives them also a platform for campaign when they come saying that, we got to have to feed the people, we got to have to end the poverty, we got to have to do this, we got to have to do that. Right?
Right. Gosh, what was that? The whole, I don't know, moral majority, the major coalitions in the 80s, I think it was Wayrick or something, that came out, we don't really want people to vote. We're better off when people don't vote. They make a lot of the statements today a lot less bluntly than they used to. But it's the same basic point. Voter suppression is a major, major problem in this country. And when people are getting behind this, I just want the elections to be fair, legal. But no, you don't. What you're trying to do is to suppress the voices of people, which is pretty much the opposite of what we're supposed to be aiming for as a country. What our founding values are really all about is improving people's basic, their own liberties, their own voice, giving them a voice in government. So voter suppression, I mean, it always comes up as a significant issue here. And yeah, we do need to find some way to encourage people. And I think one of the single best ways to encourage people to vote, and this is one of the reasons that I really enjoy talking to a lot of progressive candidates, is you have to give them something worth voting for.
Yes,
if you're going to
absolutely.
ask somebody to take the time out and to stand in line and to cast that vote, and in a lot of states, they make it very, very difficult to do. I mean, I'm sort of fortunate that I can always just vote by mail. In many states, you can't. So you're going to force somebody to go out of their way to do something, give them something worth supporting, someone who will fight for them, someone who's not just another, stuffed corporate shirt.
I'm so glad that you touched on that specific topic. Recently, in one of the in our county conventions, I touched on that subject very carefully, also saying that look, it's very important year this year. Every year is important, but the midterms right now, the decision will be made. When you knock on the doors, when you canvassing, you're saying that, you hear so many people saying that, oh, go TV, right? Get out and get out to vote. So we've got to have to knock on the doors and encourage people to get out and vote. I'm like, okay, so I'm a voter. You knock on my door right now as of today. You say that, Ram, you have to get out and vote. I'm going to be like, Lim, I don't owe you any goddamn thing.
Right.
So I don't have to get out and vote. If you want me to get out and vote, if you want me to get out and vote for Democrat or for you specifically, I think you're going to have to do a little bit better than that. So give me the reason to get out and vote, and give me the reason to vote for you. So I would say that, my four-way approach. First of all, combat any nonsense that conservatives are spreading about socialism this, socialism that. Even though I was born in a socialistic country, I can tell you everything about socialism, right? They come to you having absolutely no clue what socialism is. Right. They're feeding that with all this nonsense, and unfortunately, people are swallowing it. So many people are swallowing it. But I'll say that, look, you got to have to combat that. Second, you got to have to show what's been done in the last year. Unemployment is down. Economy is up, right? What's been accomplished, and show them what can be done, what could have been done if we didn't have that razor-thin majority in Senate with 2 senators who are blocking so many vital bills. Just imagine what could have been accomplished if we had two more senators, so we wouldn't be at the mercy of those 2 right now, where we cannot pass so many vital bills, Voting Rights Act, Build Back Better, right? So everything is stalled because of those 2 senators there. Everything is stalled because of filibuster. So that's give them the reason and show them that, look what was done back then. Look what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. And look what we did in the last year itself, accomplished in the last year itself. With inflation, people talk about, I said, if a Republican knocks on my door right now and start talking about, look what Democrats did with inflation. Inflation is up. Look what's happening at the gas station. If I don't know any better, I'm sold. I'm going to be like, oh yeah, Democrats did that. I'm going to be voting Republican. But if we educate people to show them that inflation has nothing to do, President Biden, he does not control the prices at the gas station. So it's everything driven by the corporate, by the oil industries. Mm-hmm. Look, the oil price is down. Why are the gas prices not going down? Because we just got out of COVID, and all those industries, they're trying to make up for the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, you were not driving. The gas price, if you remember, they were cheaper than water. Right? The gas was cheaper than the water, actually, because nobody was driving. Everybody's sitting at home, right? So now everybody's out.
Right.
So they're trying to airlines, the hotels, everything, the inflation. So that's what fuels it up. Yeah. It has nothing to do with Biden. I mean, come on. Inflation is up all over the world right now.
Oh yeah, and the prices are much higher in we honestly have some of the lowest fuel prices in the rich world. And people are still worked up about it and think it's somehow a political issue. No, so what's driving the, like, I don't know, $9 or $10, $12 fuel in parts of Europe? I mean, the same basic dynamics. It's a global process, the way what prices work. And you have people complaining this is socialism, and what they're describing is corporate capitalism. And that profit idea. It's basic supply and demand. The demand is higher now because we're going back to work, and they can get away with charging it because there's nothing we do to interfere with that. So, it's funny that you have people basically complaining about the system that we have. It's not a political issue.
It has nothing to do, but what the conservatives have, the strength that they have, they grasp on that lie and they combat. They're not different. They're being in offensive mode rather than defensive. And the problem with the Democrats these days,
right?
They're being defensive.
Always playing defensive.
They're playing defense. Yeah. Well, they stop this tiptoeing. You know what I'm saying? Equivocating, right? So and start attacking. That's why I love progressive, because they're not fooling around. They're saying that this is the issue, this is the data, this is the solution. This is the problem. This is the solution.
Right.
So nobody's tiptoeing around, right? Nobody's equivocating in front of Republic. But we got to have to be more aggressive to show them this is what's been done. This is what can be done more. If anybody talks about inflation, give them a reason that has nothing to do with us, has nothing to do with the current administration. Inflation is up all over the world right now, right? Look what happened. We're out of. Technically, we're out of pandemic. So many vaccinations are out, right? Unemployment, historically low unemployment. The wages are up in the IT industry. Where I work, I'm losing so many workers because they're leaving for competitors, because competitors they offer better salaries, higher salaries, right? By 10, 20, 15,000 more what I can do there, right? So the economy is booming right now. But we got to have to make sure that we are helping middle class and working class.
We're not leaving people behind in that growth. Yeah. And what we've been doing for the last few decades is allowing all of these booms to affect the top 10% and to leave more and more Americans behind. That growth should be able to, I don't know, to use an old term here, it should be able to trickle down to us, but it's not. And I think we need to do something to push that kind of like equality of opportunity again. This is one of the things that's impressive about your candidacy and so many others, is a desire to talk about real solutions and not to dance around this stuff. We spend so much time playing defense, simply responding to Republican rhetoric, and then you're like, well, no, that's not actually it. And then you fall into a trap of trying to undo the damage that they're done, and it takes away the time that you could be advancing your vision for the country and what we could do. So there's an interesting one I think that we can ask about then that you kind of raised a moment ago, this question of fossil fuels. Because the costs right now keep going up, and if anything, if the situation, both because of increased demand out of the pandemic and their ability to set prices wherever the hell they want, plus an impact on the global oil prices because of the conflict, because even though the U.S. doesn't need much Russian oil or whatever, it still affects the price globally, so it still is going to be a problem for us at the end of the day. What this sort of tells me is that we should find a way out of subsidizing fossil fuels and instead focus on alternatives, because we already have them. And so many alternatives that we could build up our power structure around cannot be monopolized. They cannot be taken away. If there's a war somewhere else in the world, it doesn't affect whether the sun shines. So why aren't we investing there?
Absolutely. I'm with you. Renewable energy, right? I was recently, Liam, last week when I was at the forum, there was a question from the audience saying that, okay, the prices are up, the war in Ukraine is affecting everything right now. What can be done in the short term? I'm like, what can be done? That's nothing. What can we do in the short term? Do we really have to focus on the short term, or we need to focus always on the long term? Because to your point, Liam, we stopped purchasing from Russia. And there's a conversation was going on maybe to purchase from Iran or Saudi Arabia. How long until the next crisis? Mm-hmm. What if Iran tomorrow, we purchase from Iran, and Iran takes example from Russia and says, you know what, I want to invade, I don't know, Kuwait or Iraq or whatever. and there's a new war starts in the region, it affects us immediately because we purchase oil from them. Same thing with Venezuela or Saudi Arabia. How long until the next crisis? So do you really want to have the dependency on the fossil fuel? Do you really, or it's time for us to wake up finally, to realize that we are long past due of the moment when you have to focus on the renewable energy. So something happens, God forbid, something happens tomorrow, you don't have the dependency. So to answer the question about short term, what do you want to do on the short term period? Like they were asking, in the short term, minimum wage, we got to have to increase. We got to have to set the universal guaranteed minimum income. Raise the minimum wage. We got to have to provide the health. We got to have to create opportunity in the short term. That's what we need to do. But in the long term, we're going to always have to think about 20, 30, 50 years from now.
Right.
And renewable energy is the only answer. Otherwise, nothing tells us what's going to happen the next year, 2 years, 3 years. Somebody else decides to wage a war on a different country. Somebody else decides to invade some other countries. It's always going to affect us. So do we want to just sit and wait and hope that it's not going to happen? Or do we not want to take the chance and say, you know what, it's time for me to march towards renewable energy, independence, to have that independence.
And this is a place where American ingenuity really could shine, where we really could show that something about that can-do spirit. I mean, I'm getting closer to 50 here, and it's hard not to think back, to an event just before I was born. We had a major spike in oil prices in 1973 because of a conflict and because they decided to cut production. So there's a war, production goes down, costs go up. Next thing you know, we're falling into massive, stagflation, they called it. And we didn't think long term. I mean, Carter put solar panels on the roof of the White House and Reagan took them right back off and canceled tons of our investments in it. And the end result of that is today, places like China are world leaders in solar and innovation and battery innovation. That could have been us. But we stopped thinking long-term and only thinking short-term. We need to take care of the immediate crisis. We need to help Americans to make their bills now, but we need to think about the future too. How do we gain real independence? And when Republicans are thinking we gain energy independence by drilling for more oil, they're not understanding that oil is a global commodity. And we cannot control the prices there. We will never be independent of these issues as long as we're dependent upon a resource like that can be controlled. So. Absolutely.
So it's not a short-term answer. There's no, and the answer that I gave, I said, I don't know what the short-term answer is. I'm always looking at the long-term. Short-term, I mean, you can come up with anything you want in the short term, but always think about long-term opportunities.
Right. We need that as well. Yeah, we need Democrats to dream again. We need them to be willing to stand up and articulate a vision of where we could be in the future, take care of problems now, but also plan for where we're going to go. Okay, so I have one key question sort of related to the whole independent Democrats idea. So I'm going to ask, would you pledge to hold people accountable for corruption, for the lobbying, for their voting records in Congress, people of either party? Would you be willing to call out issues like that?
110%. 110%. Not only holding them accountable, but making it public. Public was that it's everybody, every single voter got to have to know what their representatives, what their senators do. Mm-hmm. Liam, the problem that I see today, and I've been seeing that for a long time with so many representatives, they are forgetting who the boss is.
Right.
Who sent them there and who they work for. They work for you. They work for me. That's it. They're not working for the I didn't send them to work for the special interest. I didn't send them there to represent a lobbyist. I didn't send them to accept those corrupted money and the dark money or whatever. I send them there to represent my interest, to be my voice. So to your point, absolutely 110%, but not only hold them accountable, but making sure that everything they do, every single action is open to the public. And public knows, every single voter knows what's going on out there.
To me, this is something that I want to see more and more Democrats talking about, because corruption is a bipartisan issue. Everyone understands that. 90% of Americans understand that lobbyists really call the shots in Washington. There's a reason people call it the swamp or whatever. We need to be able to address that. And to address that, we have to be willing to call it out. We have to point to it. We have to say, this is why these votes happen. And people are not actually putting our interests first. And I want to see people willing to step up and sort of embrace that kind of anti-corruption rhetoric. It's a huge deal for me, and it's a huge deal for people that follow me. So thank you very much for that. So the last thing that I really have for you is I want to ask, people have heard this, people are interested, and we know today that the situation for progressive campaigns is very different than it was a few decades ago. You can raise money all around the country from small dollar donors. We have to get somehow past the dependence on big money. And the price of a coffee a month, if you set up like a $5 recurring donation, that's the price, that's the margin of victory for progressive campaigns all across this country. If you get a few thousand people that'll give you $5 a month, we've got what we need to win this. So if people have heard this and they're interested in you and they want to support your campaign, whether, in your own district or outside of it, how can they find you on social media? How can they find your website and donate?
Thank you very much for that question. They can go to the ramforcongress.com. It's RAMFOR Congress.com. They can follow me on the page. There's a donation button. There's links to the social media where they can follow us. But to say upfront, and I have it on my AgBlue account, I'm not accepting any corporate donation, corporate PAC money. This is a grassroots campaign. This is a true progressive campaign. And if you look at my report, a financial report on FS, you will see that's exactly what I'm talking about. That it's small dollar amount from people like you and I. Somebody that might not afford change, but they deserve changes. But just because they cannot pay for it, they cannot afford, doesn't mean they don't deserve it. So some people come approach me saying that I cannot donate, but I can donate my time. I don't have money, but I can donate my time. What can I do for you, right? So anybody out there, like if they can help us with phone banking, simply sitting at home, a few hours a day, help us with the phone texting, phone banking, any help is appreciated. As I said, this is a true grassroots campaign. If you, anybody out there who can spare us $1 or $2 or $5, recurring amount, as much as you can, God bless you. Do that. If not, no worries at all. We're not here to ask for the money. In fact, it's interesting that every time when I talk, I try to talk to people about what I want to do. And I've seen with some other candidates at the end, they ask for money, they ask for help. Believe it or not, I don't do that. And not because I'm a shy. I'm here to help and to show you what is it that I can do with my vision, with my ideas. And if this is something that you like, you might think to yourself, saying, I like what he's got to say. I'm going to help him. I don't have much to give, but whatever I have, I can help him, right? Your time, financial assistance, anything you can. If not, by all means, stay healthy. We're here for you. I'm here to fight for every single one of you, even if you're not in a district. But believe it or not, if elected, decisions that I'll make there for you will affect every single one of us, right? So the platform that I'm running for the people everywhere, not only in our district, not only in our state, but all over the country. We need changes, right? And the last thing what I will say is, if you allow me, elected representatives and decision-making bodies, Liam, whether it's local, federal, even Supreme Court, nowadays that you see what's going on with those people over there. All those represent all the decision-making bodies. They serve their communities best when they have a direct experience with the challenges their constituents are facing. And I'm bringing my own experience in every single issue that I'm advocating for. In my platform, every single issue that you will see, it comes from my personal experience in this country. It comes from my personal empathy. It comes from the personal pain. That's what I bring into this campaign, right? And that's what I say that as a congressman, what is my pledge? I will fight for legislation that ensures everyone has opportunity for a decent standard living and protection of individual freedom and human rights. That's all. That's all I'm asking to do. And here, this is what I'm here to stand for, to make sure that protection of individual freedom and human rights, accessibility and affordability, equal opportunity, period. Equal opportunity in everything.
And this is what we need. And honestly, this is the way that we get it. If we are willing to, and I know this is hard, and I know that not everyone can do this, but every little bit you do helps. If you have a little time, because of everything working on the internet now, you can text bank for somebody without, having to be in a location. It is possible to help out these campaigns, and even the smallest contributions help. Even if you're only sending a few dollars here, it adds up, and we tend to forget the power that we have. And if we're ever going to break the power of the big lobbyists who are sending the same people year after year who are not listening to us, we have to send ordinary people willing to fight for us. And to make that possible, we have to step up at that price of a coffee every now and then and help people out. And this is the way to do it. We have to we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting it to come out differently. We need new voices. So I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really want to see you do well in this race here. So I'm hoping people will jump in and help out.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Liam. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. It's not every day when you have that kind of inspirational conversation, because believe it or not, you actually gave me some inspiration right now in the conversation, bringing your knowledge, bringing your wisdom. So I really appreciate that opportunity and share my vision with you, and to hear your perspectives also that that are aligned. Actually, we share the mutual interest, mutual perspectives, and our interests aligned together. So it's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, it's my pleasure, and I'm very happy to do whatever I can to help out. So thanks very much for your time, and please hop on to Ram for Congress and help out where you can. So thanks very much, folks.